The critique of attitudes is the subject of William Blake's poetry, which is why he makes such an interesting ecological poet, though not a nature poet, and not an environmental poet by any stretch of the imagination. For he saw immediately that nature codes for a certain attitude that he found regressive and oppressive. His songs of innocence and of experience are a wonderful, deceptively simple attitudes, or as he says, contrary states of the human soul, which you can teach undergraduates to read by telling them to put a speech bubble around them. In England in the 1970s there was a common newspaper competition called Spot the Ball. A group of soccer players appear in a photo, all positioned differently, and you have to put an X where you think the ball is. Blake's songs, by contrast, are Spot the Player. There's the ball hanging in space. And you have to figure out the position of the player, the attitude that must have determined the position of the ball. So, for instance, the tiger isn't really about tigers, and only superficially about whether God could have created evil things. It's about how the attitude that sees things as autonomous external objects, objectification, imagines God to be an all-powerful tyrant to whom we must kowtow. The universe is a mysterious place of powerful sublimity that makes us tremble with fear, and so on. It's about a state of mind that reduces reality to a set of rhetorical questions along the lines of, is the Pope Catholic? What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? That's the last two lines of the Tiger. That question implies an answer that somehow we all know very well. My ideology warning light blinks on now. Like those Discovery shows, those Discovery Channel shows about the awesome destructive power of Mother Nature. Unlike the speaker in its mirror poem, The Lamb, the narrator of the Tiger is too scared and tongue-tied and oppressed by his ignorance, masquerading as worldly wisdom and experience, to be able to see how he's caught in an attitude of which he's not conscious. Innocence for Blake doesn't mean ignorance, but simply never having harmed anyone whatsoever, a state that gives you a lot of power. Experience, funnily enough, is the ignorant one. It tells lies in the form of the truth, and this is where we need to revisit the notion of nature. Nature seems incontestably there, as many have reminded me, because what I need, as the theory guy, is a good strong dose of it to set me straight. Karl Kroeber, in Environmental Literary Criticism, which was published in about 92 or 93, literally says that what so-called postmodern theorists need is a night out in a Midwestern thunderstorm, a kind of ritual hazing that sounds horribly like waterboarding in 2009. But it's the there-ness, I'll go further and say the over-there-ness of nature, that's actually a lie in the form of the truth, like one of Blake's songs of experience. What kind of attitude, what kind of lie is this truth enabling? Ironically, I claim that the attitude that nature enables is the dreaded dualism, Cartesian and otherwise, from which nature speak in all its guises, from romanticism to environmentalism, has sought to extricate itself. Nature is over there, subject is over here. Nature is separated from us by an unbridgeable ontological wall like a bulletproof plate glass window, plate glass being the Romantic period invention that enabled shops to display their wares as if they were in a picture frame, aestheticized and therefore separated ontologically from the viewer, belonging to another order of reality altogether. Now, this mention of plate glass isn't accidental, because plate glass is a physical byproduct of a quintessentially romantic production, the production of the consumerist. Not the consumer, but the consumerist, that is, someone who is aware that she or he is a consumer, someone for whom the object of consumption defines their identity, along the lines of that great romantic phrase invented once by the gourmand Brillat-Savarin and once again by Feuerbach, you are what you eat. Now, this phrase implies that the subject is caught in a dialectic of desire, with an object with which it's never fully identical, just as Wile E. Coyote never catches up with Roadrunner in the cartoon. If Wile E. Coyote ever did catch Roadrunner, he would eat Roadrunner, at which point Roadrunner would cease to be Roadrunner and would become Wile E. Coyote. There is, in effect, then, a radical ontological separation between subject and object, and yet, and at the same time, consumerism implies a performative identity that can be collapsed into its object. So we can talk of vegetarians, hip-hop fans, opium eaters, and so on. These performative styles are outlined by myself and Colin Campbell. One style stands out, and that's a kind of meta-style that Campbell calls bohemianism and which I call romantic consumerism. This kind of consumerism is at one remove from regular consumerism. It's consumerism-ism, as it were, that has realised that the true object of desire is desire as such. In brief, romantic consumerism is window shopping, which is hugely enabled by plate glass, or as we now do, browsing on the internet. not consuming anything but wondering what we would be like if we did, and I can't help noting that the modern Macs and iPhones have got that layer of glass which provides the crucial aestheticizing screen between you and the computer. Now, in the Romantic period, this kind of reflexive consumerism was limited to a few avant-garde types, the Romantics themselves. To this extent, Wordsworth and De Quincey are only superficially different. Wordsworth figured out that he could stroll forever in the mountains. De Quincey figured out that you didn't need mountains if you could consume a drug that gave you the feeling of strolling in the mountains, sublime, contemplative calm, and so on. Nowadays, we're all De Quincys, all flaneurs in the shopping mall of life. This performative role, this attitude, is all the more pervasive, leading me to believe that we haven't really exited from the Romantic period, another sense in which prehistory isn't quite right for what I'm describing, but extremely right in another sense, namely that we're still caught in an attitude that we don't fully understand or become aware of. Romantic consumerism can go one step higher than the Kantian aesthetic purposelessness of window shopping when it decides to refrain from consumerism as such. This is the attitude of the boycotter, who emerges as a type in the proto-feminism of the blue stocking circle in the 1780s and 1790s, and which Mary and Percy Shelley and many others continued. The specific product boycotted was sugar, which was sentimentally described as the crystallized blood of slaves. By describing it thus, the boycotter turned the object of pleasure into an object of disgust. In order to have good taste, you have to know how to feel appropriate disgust, how to turn up your nose at something. So the 0-degree performance of taste would be spitting something disgusting out, or vomiting Mr. Creosote. So the height of good taste performativity is abstaining from sugar and spice if you're one of the Shelleys, who correctly held that spice was a product of colonialism. Their vegetarianism was thus not only anti-cruelty, but also anti-flavour. The attitude of the boycotter is that she or he has exited consumerism, but one could just as easily claim that this attitude is itself a form of consumerism, as I've just argued. It's a performance of a certain style of aesthetic judgment. So thinking that you've exited consumerism might be the most quintessentially consumerist attitude of all. In large part, this is because you see that the world of consumerism is an evil world. You, having exited this world, are good. Over there is the evil object, which you shun or seek to eliminate. Over here is the good subject, who feels good precisely insofar as she or he has separated from the evil world. I am now describing Hegel's beautiful soul, who claims precisely to have exited the evil world. Now, the twist that Hegel applies here is so beautiful that it's worth pausing over, and perhaps adding a remark or two on torture, and possibly on Dick Cheney, who seems to be preoccupying us all at present. Hegel doesn't claim that the world may or may not be evil. He doesn't claim that what is wrong with the beautiful soul is that it is prejudiced and rigid in its thinking. The world is not some object that we can have different opinions about. No, the problem is far subtler than that. The problem is that the gaze that constitutes the world as a thing over there is evil as such. This is so brilliant that it's worth repeating. Evil is not in the eye of the beholder. Evil is the eye of the beholder. Evil is the gaze that sees the world as an evil thing over yonder. Clearly we're in Bush-Cheney territory here, and Al-Qaeda territory, with their platitudes about the axis of evil and evil in America, and so on. Evil is the materialism that sees evil as a lump of nasty stuff over there that I should be hell-bent on eliminating.